Alright, we just tried to start the stream. Let's see if this works a little bit better now. Yeah, because that was not very successful. Alright. Alright, just testing this out, seeing if we are actually indeed live right now. We should be live now. Hey, is the sound okay now? I tried to do stream beforehand and that was not very successful. the mic basically exploded, so that didn't work. Hey Alex, hey Nafi. Can you guys just confirm that things are working as they should? Because I'm still a little afraid that it's not. Yay, it's good. Cool. So we are taking general questions now and just sculpting and having a good time. So let me know what your questions are and if, yeah, let's just have a good time. Just sharing the stream a few different places now. I'm gonna be sculpting some kind of dinosaur creature now, which is gonna be a fun one. Cool. So I will just, until more people show up, I'll just be doodling around a little bit in Zbrush, just testing out a few different designs. Yeah, sure. Are you talking about the stream before when I was trying the mic? Sometimes the mic does that. I'm not entirely sure why the mic does that, but it does. So let's hope it's okay now. Hey, thanks a lot, Bamsi. I appreciate that. So I am literally just doodling around now, like basically just warming up. I really prefer to do like a bit of like warm up before, you know, properly getting into sculpting. It's almost like working out, you know, you just have to warm up a little bit. Just helps a fair bit. Helps you to test out a few designs as well. It means you get to test out the bad designs and you get to, you know, get those out of your system before. In terms of style, which artist has influenced your work the most? That's the Dishonored franchise, or rather, you know, the two games that came out just as I was studying, and particularly the first one, and I just love that style. So I don't think there's anything else that's come out that's influenced me like that. If the most similar thing today would be Arcane, actually, which is just fantastic as well. I'm really enjoying that style. It's really fun to just doodle around in Zbrush, just trying out ideas, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't. I really think Zbrush is one of the most creative software ever made when it comes to that. Like way more than like doing stuff even like traditionally as well. The speed of which you can try things with is insane. What's interesting with concepting in 2D versus in 3D is that 2D is obviously faster when it comes to blocking out the quick ideas, but the moment you get into the slight more of specificity than just the pure idea when it comes to anything, what are the volumes, it's so much quicker to do it in Zbrush, just because here you're doing volume at the same time. Well, if you were to do concept, you would have to draw turnarounds and turntables, and you would have to block that out in 3D afterwards, and there is a lot of transition or translation errors happening. But in 3D, you're just doing that right away. Have you ever tried 3D Code? Yes, I have. 3D Code is an excellent little software. I haven't used it a whole lot because I didn't really need anything it was offering. Like texturing was done in another software. I had software for retopology. I always had Zbrush for sculpting. But it looks like a really good general tool. For me, 3D Code seems like a bit of like a Swiss Army tool, like a Swiss Army knife, where it's not necessarily the best at a lot of things. Maybe retopology, it looks good there, but it's like it can just really help you in general, all sorts of small little tasks here and there, just like just making your life a lot easier as a 3D artist. What kind of character modeling portfolio does Disney and Pixar prefer? Well, without having worked at Disney and Pixar, the answer there is basically what they do. Make things that they actually do themselves. There's no reason to have something hyper realistic if you want to work for some of those companies. Make sure they do what they want to see. If you're working, it's the same thing. If you want to work for ILM, don't do Pixar style characters. It's just not relevant. It's a whole different skill set doing something stylized versus realistic. So be sure that you're aiming for that. And advice for technical artists. The interesting thing about technical artists is that is such a broad range of a description. I don't actually know what a technical artist actually means. It could be a coder, it could be somebody who's doing something more technical like Houdini or maybe rigging, shader writing. So we have to just specify what does that actually mean. Are we getting a retop or a hand and a foot in my tutorial? We're probably not going that specific. We have a whole course on retopology though, for which you can find, which we have here, which covers how to retopology as a whole body, which does technically cover how to do a hand and a foot, which you can see here. Well, a tiny little creature foot, but no, nothing specific here. Also, just a little reminder that today is indeed Black Friday, and all our exclusives are 50% off, and most products on the store are also 50% off. So if you've been interested in something, feel free to head over to our site. There's a link in the description here, or FlippedNormals.com, and you can check it out. Let's Dolt Guy. I've been binging your Blender tutorials recently. You guys pretty much getting me through my last year of uni. You guys are the best. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. That means a lot. Is there anything you would like to see in terms of Blender content, or is there anything we can do better in terms of our Blender content? I mean, Blender is here to stay, and I would love to make better content for it. Until when is the Black Friday sale? That lasts until December 5th. So Sunday next week. Do you personally use, I don't know what SAM laptop is, but a SAM laptop or high-end PC for sculpting texturing? Yeah, I have a medium-end gaming laptop. I actually have a mini PC. It fits within like my carry-on suitcase. So I don't have something crazy high-end at all, to be honest. So for the work I'm doing, I don't need something absolutely insane. But I've been using a laptop for years as well. But the biggest thing I actually recently 2 years ago now got was, I went from a laptop to a stationary, and the biggest thing there was the fact that I had an RTX card, so I can actually use GPU rendering, and I love GPU rendering. That would be the one thing that would be hard to go back to. It's a little annoying though, because when I do make tutorials rendering, I can't use GPU rendering at all, simply because you can't really record and use GPU rendering at the same time, which is really annoying. I recorded, if you guys have seen the latest Blender tutorial we have on our channel, where we're going through lighting and all that. That was recorded twice. The first time was So it was just so annoying. The whole thing was recorded, and then I realized I was using GPU rendering for the rendering, and something happens with OBS and when you're dealing with GPU rendering, and it just does not work. The entire thing just was messed up. There's a special kind of pain when you have recorded something and you thought it went really well, and then you have to redo the whole thing again. Good times, good times. The one talking is Henning, the bald one. Yes, I suppose that's true. Yes, I am indeed the bald one. How do you approach unique scale patterns in an area like the head? Do you use alpha or hand sculpting? Yes, that's a good question. Like, let's say we had something like you needed like some scales here, for instance. Depending on how big they are, I would sculpt them by hand. Like if we had some like scales like this, the size of like this thing here, might do some of this later because I want to do a dinosaur. This is just my little warm up. So if this was the case, I would have definitely done this by hand, simply because you control a lot more. But if you, like, you know, you can see it's pretty fast to block something out like this, and it can look quite organic and nice. But if you're dealing with something crazy tiny, let's say you're at like this level, and you need to do scales like this, then you're not going to do that by hand unless you have a lot of time. Then I would use alphas for this. Like you might even make hand drawn alphas, which you can do quite easily. If you want to, here's a little tip as well, actually, we have tutorials on this, but if you want to do like VDM brushes or alphas done by hand, what you can do is you can do that using a like a plane like this, and you can subdivide this up quite a lot. Then you can make a new layer. And then you can just, you know, kind of draw whatever you want to on this. You can, you know, you can really make these nice alphas, and you know, make sure they're working really well. You know, no better than my 10-second alpha right here. And then you can like, I think it's under alpha, and create, modify. It's under here somewhere. Yeah, I think it's grab doc. Yeah, grab alpha from doc. And here you're actually grabbing the alpha, and now boom, you have an alpha. So now you can use this as a proper alpha to stamp something across. That's exactly how you made the skin kit. Let me show you this as well. That's how you made this guy here. So if you are doing something like scales or something like that, then I recommend I highly recommend making your own alphas. Like here, all this is just like alphas made in hand and Zbrush and just stamped across, which just makes your life so much easier. All of this stuff here, this is all just done by the skin kit, which, you know, you can very much do using this technique here. Just, you know, good. Just a better job than I'm doing here. All right, so explaining that, let's go back to some of the questions. Ankur is saying, so I was right. I thought he was the bald one. Yes, that's still true. And I bought you into my course. It was amazing, but I prefer you give us more homework. You only gave us the Spartan helmet. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. You know, something we try to do with the tutorials we're doing is to always have practical assignments. Like in the intro to my course, we do go through how to make the Spartan helmet, which is, you know, obviously a cool thing and all that, and it's very practical. But what I've been really starting to think about recently is that there should be a lot more, not necessarily like bigger projects. I think it's fine to have a small one or a medium one like that, because they also take a lot of time to do, but more that there should be exercises along the way. If we're doing retopology, it should be like, all right, try this first and then see how I solved the issue. So that's definitely something I want to do. Kind of set up the students to fail and then show them how it's done, just to like enhance the learning. Not fail in a catastrophic way, but just so that the students get to try it out themselves. Any idea how Arcane achieved the look on the characters? I actually do have an idea of that. For looking at Arcane, you know, without having seen breakdowns of it, because I've been actually looking for it, the way I think they were doing that is I think they had some decent models, obviously, well, good models, but I think they had some some fairly decent models made in you know, a regular 3D pipeline, probably with some displacement maps and such, or maybe all the details were baked into the topology. And then I think it's honestly just fantastic art direction where it's hand painted on top. I don't think there's any magic in how Arcane did it. I think it's just really, really, really good art direction, probably between concept artists and production artists going a lot back and forth. At least that's how I would have done it. You know, if you're looking at it, like the textures aren't really following the light or anything like that. The textures seem very much baked into it. I think the hard thing there is just that you just have to be a damn good artist to pull that off. What tablets are you using? I'm using a regular run-of-the-mill Wacom Intuos tablet. Any tablet works, honestly. Is adding details easier than getting the basic forms? Yes. I find detailing to be so much easier. Doing the basic forms is hard. That's when you have to properly think about what you're doing. When you're detailing, that's when I can kind of zone off or zone out, and I can focus more on. I can actually listen to some audiobooks or something, because it's very repetitive. Of course, you still have to be present, but it's still a way more repetitive thing. Well, when you're getting the forms right, like, you know what I'm doing now. You know, it looks a little smiley here, but you know, I'm actually trying to sculpt something now. But when you're doing this is when you have to think. This for me is the hard part of sculpting, getting the forms right. Detailing is labor. Yeah, here's a good one. It would be nice to get an updated video on why Blender isn't 3D industry standard. Things have changed a lot. Yeah, I mean, I still think it's mostly a relevant video, where the main points are still mostly the same. The difference is that Blender's obviously got better, and a few more studios have started using it here and there, and it's being used a lot more in concept art. Technically, Blender is very much the same. Like, you know, I have exactly the same issues with the software as it did back then as well, which, you know, makes sense. It takes a long time for them to fix it. But one of the things that is changing is a lot of people are learning it now. It's easier to crew up for production, though it's still not easy. It's, you know, if you were to remake that video, it would be in large part the same, I think, because one of the big parts is if you want to crew up for production, you need artists like right now. You cannot afford to train people. So you can do that with Maya right now. You can have a production in a month ready with 300 Maya artists. Well, maybe right now it's a shortage of artists right now, but that would be really, really hard to do with Blender. It would be basically impossible to crew up the size of something like Framestore MPC in a reasonable time frame while still using Blender. But yeah, I mean, at some point we will do an updated video on that. Do you do your block out in Zbrush or Maya? Definitely Zbrush. Blockouts, you can do blockouts in Maya if you have a base mesh. But whenever I'm designing anything, like definitely Maya. Maya, also definitely Zbrush. Sorry, Zbrush is just a much better tool for sculpting than for characters in general than what Maya is. How do you suggest to study and practice anatomy? I know it's a very wrong way, but I just watch tutorials, courses, and try to imitate a tutor. Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously I make a living out of doing a large part sculpting tutorials, right? So I obviously think that it's a good idea to watch tutorials. But on the other hand, you shouldn't only watch tutorials. The way I prefer to work is, in the beginning, watch some tutorials. Watch tutorials to get an idea of how you do something. There's no reason to try to figure out everything by yourself. Get to a certain level by watching tutorials, so you know at least like what direction to go in. But then try it out yourself. You will never learn sculpting by watching tutorials. You will learn sculpting by sculpting yourself, and then you can apply the knowledge of tutorials to your sculpting. So the right way for me to learn sculpting would be try to do as much figure sculpting as possible. watch tutorials along the way as well, but you should, it should be like the amount of work you're doing versus the amount of like lectures you're attending should always be like, you know, like 80 to 20, like in ratio, right? You should always work more than you're watching tutorials. And it's easy to fall into the trap of watching tutorials, because watching tutorials is easy because you don't have to really think. You have to kind of adapt to what the instructor is doing. And there is a time and place for that, of course, but try to do as much work as possible. Any advice for creating ID maps for Substance and ZBrush? Yeah, sure. You can polypaint stuff. I'm actually working on a tutorial where I'm doing something like that now. You can polypaint it with strong colors, or you can create polygroups like this. So you can paint where you want to be, Control W, and that's going to create polygroups in that area. Then you can export this out as an FBX, and you can use that as a starting point for your ID map, which is pretty cool. Yeah, Unclear Hippie is saying, I would recommend trying to make friends who also do 3D, because you can get real nice feedback. Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, you know, having a social network around you, like obviously real world can be better than just like Twitter or Facebook. It can really help. If you have somebody who can give you feedback along the way, that can just help you tremendously. I'm just trying out things now when it comes to sculpting, just seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. I'm not really committing to anything until I'm finding something that works. Yeah, like the point about like the 80-20 rule, you know, there isn't a rule per se, but the point about that is that you just have to do the work. Like you literally nobody can teach you how to do something without you doing it. It's like trying to get strong by watching videos instead of going to the gym. Sure, you can watch videos which can help you get motivated and can help you in general ways, but in order to actually get stronger, to get fitter, you have to just go to the gym and do the workout. There's very much an argument for watching videos on that as well, but fundamentally you just have to get your ass off the couch and get to work. Can I believe that Blender is so fun in your point of view, sir? Yes, Blender is one of the most fun software I know how to use. It's like raw creativity. Where I find Blender to be insanely frustrating though is if I have to do something highly specific. Then it can be a little tricky. I find that I don't have as much control in Blender as I do in some other software. But on the other hand, it's so fun to just experiment with the software and experimenting with things. Lopupip is saying, I finally get the opportunity to thank you for the high quality content you provide for everyone out there. Thank you so much. I appreciate that a lot. Here's actually a great question by MSR Sculpt. Will drawing improve my sculpting? Yeah, that's a good question. This is something like we've been talking about a fair bit on our channel. It's just a quick refresher here. It's a discussion of basics versus fundamentals, where in this case, basics would be not simple things, but more like technical things. This would be like, how do you operate ZBrush? What brushes do you use? In drawing, it would be like, maybe even how does perspective work? You know, a few of those things. But in fundamentals is, you know, good design, understanding form, good understanding of character design. So what you can be doing 3D, or you can be drawing for a very long time without actually being good at the fundamentals. You're just good at replicating photos. Like, you got a good technical understanding of how to replicate photos, but you're not actually good at the fundamentals. On the other hand, you can have somebody who doesn't know how to draw but have strong fundamentals, and they're excellent at character design in sculpting. So if you're good at the fundamentals of character design and shape and gesture and all that, when it comes to drawing, then yes, drawing is going to help you. But if you just know how to replicate a photo, then it's not going to help you at all, I would say. How do I know? Because that's where I was. I could do some pretty decent portraits when it came to drawing, but you know, nobody cares if you can replicate a photo. So in short, I wouldn't recommend first learning to draw and then learning to sculpt. They're two separate skills. If you want to get better at sculpting, sculpt. If you want to, and then sure, you can do some figure sculpt or figure drawing and such to supplement that. But I don't think there's any reason to spend like years trying to learn how to draw before getting into 3D. Just get started with 3D, with maybe some drawing supplements on the side. When is a good time to use HDRIs when rendering versus placing lights yourself? Yeah, that's a good question. If you're doing anything with reflections, you pretty much need HDRIs. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard to get like lively reflections. The exception could be like product shots where you really want clean reflections. Placing lights is great if you want to control the shot 100%. If you really want to just make sure that you control every single light source, then placing lights is fantastic. In reality, I use a bit of both. The HDRI will provide a much more natural looking light than placing lights will. Placing lights will often make it look like you are indeed in a studio, because you know, you're basically placing lights like in a studio, while an HDRI is more like you're outside or you're in a real environment. So how I prefer to do it is I often start off with just putting an HDRI down. And then from there, I'll start to place some more lights and I'll balance the shot with that. Because particularly if you're dealing with eyes as well, it can be really nice to have some nice rich reflections in the HDRI. How do you memorize the content of tutorials? What's the best way of learning from tutorial videos? I find it to be... I find it very helpful. Obviously taking notes is really useful and all that, but it shouldn't necessarily be so much of a memorization game, but more like the way I prefer to do tutorials is, hey, I'm wondering about how to do this thing. I've been trying it before, so I have an idea how to do it. Let's watch a tutorial on how to really get an expert opinion on it. And then you take notes on what you actually want to learn. Like, have a goal with the tutorial, because if you're just watching tutorials just to watch tutorials, then it's hard to get too much of that, because it's all new and there is so much information. Try to watch tutorials with a clear goal in mind. And then try out the techniques along the way as well. I think it's really important to try out the techniques and not just let it all go into a notebook. Exceptions here would be if there are highly specific steps. Like, let's say you need, like tutorials we've been doing is like setting up a displacement map between V-Ray and Arnold. Or, sorry, Arnold and Zbrush. Or V-Ray and Zbrush. In that case, there are just some steps. And in that case, you can make like a little to-do list for it. But really try to figure out what it is you want to learn. Are you still using that Huion Canvas Pro? Yeah, not right now though, because it's a little awkward to sculpt and talk at the same time with that, because you have to lean forward. But I'm using that as a second monitor. I'm actually reading off the questions off my canvas. Nightmare Hunter is saying, I don't have any experience in sculpting, so any tips to beginners? Yes. First, you need to learn a tool. You need to actually get started with a tool. You have to figure out what you actually want to do. And for that, we have tons of training on our YouTube channel for that, on how to sculpt, like a quick introduction to Zbrush as well there. And then, honestly, start sculpting. Start doing some things in Zbrush or Blender, wherever you're sculpting. It's going to not look great in the beginning, but that's not the point. The point is that you're starting. And then you can watch courses which can really help you along the way. But just keep on doing it. The best way to get started with sculpting is to start on sculpting. And we also have we have a lot of courses, because you know, obviously both Morten and I are sculptors. So we have 2 courses here which are really interesting. The first one here is the This is the complete bundle, which has a bunch of different courses just baked into it, which is really good. And then we have Intro to Sculpting, which teaches you how to actually sculpt in a lot of ways. Like you learn the basics and you learn the fundamentals of sculpting. You know, you go through this project as well, and by the end you'll have a decent understanding of how to sculpt. So that's one of the ways I would do it. I would get training where you need training, and then I would just keep practicing and get familiar with the tool you're using. It's really important. And I am again just trying out some things here now, seeing what works. If you want to start posting my renders in ArtStation, what passes would you recommend to upload on there besides the beauty render? I wouldn't post anything but the beauty render. If anything, you might want to do some kind of clay render or something, but honestly, just do a beauty render. And unless you're maybe, if you're a texture artist, it might be handy for somebody to review your the different passes, maybe like specular roughness or something. But honestly, do your beauty render. That is ultimately what people care about, unless there's a highly specific reason for you wanting to show off something else. Just keep it simple. It's really helpful with sculpting to do what I'm doing now, where I'm just trying out a bunch of different things. I'm not attached to any of it. Just try out a bunch of different stuff and just see if something works. And then if it doesn't work, like all the stuff over here, you just throw it out. Here's an interesting one. How different is clay sculpting compared to digital? I've been doing 3D for a bit now, and I got interested in traditional sculpture. How well do the skills translate between the mediums? What translates really well is the fundamental understanding of how form, design, and anatomy, everything works. It's still a new medium though. So, you know, it's not like I haven't done a crazy amount of clay sculpture, but for what I've done, it's a new medium. You have to learn that medium. There are some advantages to it in terms of learning. You know, you don't have symmetry, which means that you have to do both sides by yourself. But it's also highly frustrating because, you know, if you've been doing stuff in Zbrush, like blocking this kind of stuff in takes you like 2 minutes to do, or like a whole figure, you can get to the same level within like 5 minutes, which might take you like half a day, just because you have the technical stuff you have to set up. You have to set up a base, like a wooden base. You have to use some chicken wire, all that kind of stuff. Well, in Zbrush, you just kind of get started with that. So it's much simpler to get started. And also your fingers don't hurt because you're not cutting yourself on all the bloody wire. I'm not a huge fan of traditional sculpture, to be honest, just because I'm able to work so much faster. But, you know, each to their own. I know a lot of people who really love traditional sculpture. Maybe what they love is exactly what I don't like. It is the slower pace. It's all that. What exactly didn't work with the previous tryout sculpts? Well, let's have a look. I just don't like it. You know, I could maybe turn it into something interesting, but you know, I'm literally just trying out things. Here I was just literally just warming up, just trying some shapes, seeing if it works. Sometimes it's just an intuitive emotion that, yeah, I don't like it. I can turn it into something interesting, but I just don't like it. Andrea saying, hey everyone, Henning, I've done 2 of your tutorials, Intro to Zbrush and Intro to Sculpting, and I've had a lot of fun and they were super useful. Keep up the good work, man. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. It's really fun when, you know, when people like yourself watch our tutorials and have positive feedback, because it's not easy to necessarily hear from people who watch that. So if people do watch our tutorials, please let us know. It's really fun to hear the feedback. Confirmed. FlippedNormals hates traditional artists. Shaking my head. Yeah, definitely. Is creating your own character a better talent to have than just replicating somebody else's character. They're different skills. Creating your own character is more of a concept art skill, while replicating somebody else's can be more of a technical exercise or a more sculptural exercise. You can have people who are really good at creating their own character, but they're not necessarily good sculptors. And you can have people who are really good sculptors, but they're not necessarily amazing designers. So I don't think one isn't better than the other. Obviously, the best thing is if you're an amazing sculptor and an amazing designer. But most people are not. It's hard to come by those people. Here's a good question. It's not really a technical question, but have you ever had problem with just starting projects? Fear of starting, procrastination, what helped you? Yeah, this is actually something I've been dealing with. I used to work in movies, and there we had so much time on our hands. And when you're doing that, you develop a pretty decent skill set to the point that you can kind of like create most things you set out to do. And that means that I know the process of making characters pretty well, and that knowledge has almost paralyzed me. When I was a student or learning CG, I didn't really know what I didn't, the entire workflow. I wasn't really paralyzed by it. It was like, oh, I have to texture. I guess I'll just figure out how to texture. I have to groom. Well, that would be an interesting challenge. But now I know how much time it takes to do something properly, and I can feel a bit paralyzed by that, to be honest, because it's almost like the fear of, well, this, there are expectations, right? Like I used to work with this. I need to be able to show that I'm still good and I know what's going on and all that, which just meant that I didn't really start a whole lot of projects. But recently I've just been saying like, well, screw that. I'll just start the project and just not care about what expectations there might be or what anyone else cares about it, or it doesn't have to be the best thing ever. I was paralyzed by the whole thing that I know, hopefully, I should be able to do something that looks really good at the end. But maybe my goal isn't for it to look really good at the end. Maybe my goal is not to make my next best big thing, but it's just another project. It's just a little silly sculpt. Maybe that's enough for me. That's helped me. And then, it might turn out that it is the next big thing. But at least I wasn't paralyzed by that fear. Because that's been a real thing. Just really knowing that there are, just genuinely knowing all the steps involved and how much work it is and all that. That has been quite paralyzing. Do you usually do overtime in your studio? Well, I don't really have a studio. I haven't worked in film since June of 2018. Mort and I, we've been doing FlippedNormals full time since then. So now we obviously would work a lot because we have our own company now, which is a lot of work. But none of us really did overtime at the studio either. Here's an interesting question. I just have to scroll up a little bit. What are the most rewarding areas of 3D in the industry? Now, I'm expecting, I'm interpreting this question here. What is the most rewarding part? Not in a monetary sense, but in a more like intrinsic value. One of the coolest things for me, well, there are two really cool things. It was like the honor of working with some of the legit best artists in the industry. It's insane to come to work or starting a new company, and you're sitting like right next to the guy you've been following on social media and online for like 10 years, and you're like, oh yeah, we're colleagues now. That is actually an insane feeling. And then second off is also like working on cool stuff with these people. Actually working on movies which have a budget of, me being Norwegian, no movie I've ever worked on would ever have even a remote close budget to any Norwegian movies. The budgets are insane, and just knowing that millions of people are going to watch what you're working on is super cool. So those were some of the most rewarding things. And then of course, since what you're doing, you're working on such a high level with that, you have to really get good really fast. Like you just learn so much when you join your company. So all of those things combined just meant that it was really fun to work in the industry for me. AL asks, hey Henning, how much did you use to sculpt when you were a student? Oh boy, I sculpted a lot. I sculpted like every day, and quite a lot every day. I did it in a kind of stupid way though, because I just brute forced my sculpting. I just sculpted all the time. If I could have gone back, I would have sculpted way more studies of real people, like not just kind of trying to do what I'm doing now, where I'm just kind of doodling around with no reference, but actually done proper studies. I wouldn't have only done proper studies, because it is also really valuable to just doodle around, but I would have done a lot more human studies, like trying to make real people. Just because you learn so much more from that. Like this sculpt here, I can do 100 of these sculpts here, and I'm genuinely not going to learn anything. Because you know I'm just exploring things on my own. I need external input to learn new things. Like what would I learn from doing this kind of stuff? Well, maybe you learn a little bit here and there, but I can't learn anything new about anatomy, because all the anatomy, all the character designs is sourced from my own mind, and I'm not going to learn anything just from re-exploring my own mind. There isn't. It's not like, oh, you have to find yourself as an artist. No, you have to create yourself as an artist. And in the way you create yourself is you have to get materials, external materials. You need to know how to texture paint in order to be in industry as a 3D artist. No, you don't. It helps. If you're a modeler, for instance, you only need to know modeling. If you're a groomer, you need to know grooming, only that. The people who do texturing would be texture artists. So if you want to be a texture artist, that's where you would need texturing, to be honest. I know it sounds like a bit of a silly way of saying it, but texturing is something that is very useful as a generalist as well, but it is a specialized position. It would be like, do you need to know rigging if you want to be a texture artist? No, you don't. But it's definitely a useful skill to have. Particularly if you're a modeler, it's a really useful skill to have. First, it makes you more employable, because they can hire one person now who can do a whole asset instead of two people. And also but even if you don't do it, like even if you're not the final artist doing it, you at least know how it's done, which means you can model and UV map in a way that makes texturing infinitely easier. Let's Dolt Guy says, I guess all artists get paralyzed by perfectionism and self-directing expectations. Thank you very much for answering my question. Much love from Cyprus. Yeah, thank you very much. I was in Cyprus not too long ago. I was in Limassol in Paphos. That was fun. It was warm as all hell though, but good times. Yeah, I think the paralysis is a really real thing that a lot of people experience. And also like the self-judgment as well as an artist. The thing is, bad news is that never goes away. You know, I'm judging myself just as much now as when I was a beginner, maybe even way more now. It's more like, how do you deal with that? Yeah, here's a good way of putting it by an unclean hippie. I like to compare 3D to music, where playing your instrument is fun and is good because you're getting more experience, but deliberately practicing is going to be way better for growth. Yeah, exactly. It would be like if you want to learn to play the guitar and you only try to play the guitar. You're only like kind of like jamming around and you're trying to create something cool there. Yeah, you might find something interesting. You know, maybe you'll create a new original song and something like that, but you won't learn to play the guitar by just jamming. You might get more familiar with it though, and that is absolutely something you have to do. At some point you just have to sculpt a lot, but if you want to practice, you need some kind of external stimulus. I've been comparing this before as well has been like using reference. It's kind of like if you're trying to sing a song, and it might be a song you've known for like 20 years. You know the song by heart, or so you think, and you're trying to sing the song along to yourself, and you realize you don't actually know the lyrics. You think you know the lyrics, you kind of know the lyrics. If you hear the lyrics, you can sing them perfectly, but you don't actually know the lyrics to the song. But and then that's where references. It's like you think you know what a human looks like, and then you try to sculpt a human, and it turns out you don't actually know what it looks like. So in this case, with the song, you have to go back and look at the lyrics. Same in the case of a human, you just have to go back and, look at reference, see what it looks like. And the good thing about trying it out first is that now you figure out exactly what your holes are. You know, if you're trying to sing the song first yourself, you know exactly what parts are easy and what parts are hard, which means you can focus on only the parts of the song that you have a hard time with. Same with sculpting. Now, if you're sculpting a lot first and then you're trying to sculpt a human, then you look at reference afterwards. Well, now you learn what parts of it that you're having a hard time with, and you can focus on that. You can do deliberate practice, like somebody in chat was talking about now. Leonida is asking, hey Henning, is there any possibility to work in the industry as a junior at 35 years old? 100%. Absolutely. This is a pretty common question. Am I too old to work in industry? You're not. You're truly not too old. 35 is nothing. There are people of all ages in this industry doing all kinds of crazy stuff. It's pretty cool sometimes to see like threads on Twitter where people are just being like, age 28, worked as an engineer. Age 35, quit my job, wanted to become a 3D artist. Age 39, became a 3D artist. Age 42, became a lead. You know, all those kind of things. The advantage of being older versus being younger, like being something like 20, is that when you probably have some professional experience before, which means you know how to behave in a professional environment and maybe even how to thrive there. And when it comes to learning, particularly if you're studying, you know how valuable your time there is. So you're not gonna waste that time. I've seen this a fair few times where you have people who study and they're like 17 years old. And honestly, they're just dicking around. They might just be playing games and just having a good time because that's what you're doing when you're studying. And then you have some person who's like 28 or 30 or something like that. And they're just focused, so deeply focused on their studies. And those people, they just aced. They're just doing really well because they're just working a lot harder and a lot more dedicated. So in short, age 35 is totally fine. Like, don't worry about that for a second. Did you use a space mouse for sculpting Zbrush? Nope. No space mouse. I just used the good old right mouse button to navigate around. When should I specialize and how to decide what to choose? Good question. I think you should specialize once you figure out kind of what you enjoy doing. And I think you can only figure out what you enjoy doing after you've been doing 3D for a little while. Like if we're talking about a university education, that's usually 3 years. And I would say first year, you might not be in uni, but like the analogy still works. First year, you are just trying out things. You can't specialize because you genuinely don't know what there is. Should you specialize in rigging? Well, maybe you haven't even discovered that grooming and look dev or texturing is even a thing. So first, try out a lot of different things. See if there are some things you really don't enjoy. See if there are some things you enjoy, or you can be like a bit more like cynical businessman like about it, where you're like, okay, here's a thing I find to be not a whole lot of fun. It's not my favorite thing, but I'm enjoying it, and there are a lot of jobs in it. For instance, that might for you be grooming, or it might be effects work, or it might be rigging. It might be whatever it might be. It might be a thing that you can clearly see that there's a career path in, and you're just being more smart about it instead of just following your passion. And then you try it out. If you decide to become a groomer, try it out. Do a lot of projects there. Don't just sit down and decide I am going to become a groomer or I'm going to become a character artist, unless you're of course 100% decided on that. But try it out first, because it would suck if you spend a lot of resources and time trying to do something and it turns out you just genuinely don't enjoy it. It's easy to say that you like the idea of doing something instead of enjoying something yourself. I've seen this a fair few times where you have people who enjoy the idea of being a 3D artist, like, you know, in quote unquote, they enjoy like the prestige on that. It sounds a little bit weird when you put it like that, but like they would enjoy the idea of working on a video game, and they would enjoy the idea of you know, maybe getting a movie credit, which, you know, is fine, but they don't necessarily enjoy the work itself. And then you're a bit in trouble. So you need to find something you actually enjoy doing, because if the only thing you're in it for is to get a movie credit, well, that first off, you might not get a movie credit because you often don't, and second off, that's like you work for something for 2 years and now you get 20 seconds or 10 seconds of satisfaction. It needs to be something deeper than that. Barbara says, I love your tutorials, they help me a lot. Oh, there was a PS there. Yes, I assume there was another question on top. And just other praise. Thank you. Hey, I'm working as a 3D generalist in Poland, but I think about moving abroad. Do I need a degree? Does degree from Poland, East Europe is valid around the world? Yeah, that's a visa question, I suppose. Poland is in the EU though, so if you're trying to go within the EU, you shouldn't really need a degree at all just for purely for immigration. You should just be able to move where you want to go. Degrees are a tricky thing, because I genuinely find degrees not really worth anything apart from, you know, apart from visas. Studios will not really care about your degree. Like I have a bachelor. Nobody knows I have a bachelor. You guys know I have a bachelor now. That's basically it. I've never used my bachelor. I'm not entirely sure where my bachelor is. If you wanna work abroad, first, obviously, check out like the visa requirements. If you want to work in Canada or US and you're from Poland, check what you need to actually work there. And a degree might be a tool for getting that thing. But if not, like if you want to work in like Germany or France or Norway or Denmark or something like that, then I mean, you're more welcome to contact the studios in those countries as well. But figure out what is that you actually need, because degrees are expensive. Even if you, let's say, even if they don't cost you any money because they might be free, or you know, you don't even have to pay rent because you're living with somebody, they're still expensive because they cost you time. So cherish your time. Time is a resource as well. So the question is, figure out if you need a degree for immigration purposes, which depends entirely on your country. And if no, then I don't find degrees to be very useful. There's a whole like the question was, are degrees from Eastern Europe worth anything? And the thing is, in the VFX industry, degrees from any university isn't worth anything. If you have a master's from Harvard or Yale or anything like that, wouldn't be worth anything. They would go. Like I was talking to my former boss at MPC, and I was like, what if somebody applied here with a PhD? He would be like, sweet. Can I see a portfolio? And that would be it. But yeah, I do just want to caveat that with that there might be immigration. It might help with immigration. Here's a question as well before. How was your experience at MPC? I actually really had a good time at MPC. I worked on it was my first, I was interning at Framestore before, and then I went straight to MPC afterwards. And what was cool about that, they allowed me to just try out a bunch of different things. I was hired as a modeler, but I quickly, like basically after like one small project, I went straight into texturing, because I saw that I was able to do texturing as well in Mari. This was before Painter, way back in the day. And then I did some texturing there, and then I was able to do some concept sculpting, some retopology and characters, and generally able to work on a lot of really, really cool movies. The cool thing about MPC was that they allowed me to work on cooler stuff than I would have been able to work on basically any other studio. I don't think anyone would have given somebody with 2 years experience like sculpting like the xenomorph or an alien, but that was possible at MPC, and I'm eternally grateful for that. So that was really cool. Best book about Maya. I would say it's time for a little for a little talk about the Black Friday sale, because the best book on Maya, I don't think there are any good books on Maya, simply because they get out of date so fast. If you want to learn about Maya, I highly recommend this course. I mean, I'm biased, I made it, so there's that. But it's 12 hours long. It goes through all sorts of different things. There's a whole chapter list here just going through all the different things. Currently 50% off, $30, 12 hours long. So if you are interested in learning Maya, I highly recommend this course. I'm sure there are other nice courses as well. And we have a few on our site. But I know that this is pretty solid because I've personally quality control this one. But yeah, books in 3D, I don't find books in 3D to be very good at all. They can be good if they're talking about something like deeply fundamental, like maybe maths or programming, but I really don't find books to be useful when it comes to technical 3D. I mean, if you have a book that's like imagine a 3-year-old book on Blender, the entire thing is useless. Like you literally can't use anything from that book. We had that issue as well when it came to like Blender and sculpting tutorials. Morten made a tutorial on Blender sculpting, and then like 6 months later, it was literally out of date. So like the features were just completely different. So books in 3D, not a big fan. Can you name a couple of movies that you worked on? Yes, I should be able to. Henning, on IMDb. Let's see what it says here, because I have forgotten. Yes, I worked in the industry between 2014 and 18. So the last one I worked on was Venom, which was that was a texture artist there at DNIC. Then it was Pacific Rim, where Morten and I worked together. That was a really fun one. That was a crazy show where we did kaijus. I did some concept sculpting for The Mummy. I did a lot of work on all sorts of stuff on Pirates. Worked on Alien Covenant. Did a lot of creature work there, which was a crazy fun one. Legend of King Arthur is one of those. It came out in 2017. I worked on it in 2015. I barely have any memories of actually working on that. Life, the first one I worked on at DNIG. That was a really fun one. Monster Trucks. Monster Trucks is the best movie of all time. This is insane. Like seriously, it's a fun and stupid movie. A friend and I, Matthias, we watched it at the same time in the cinemas, and there was he was rigging this guy for like a year or something like that. This guy is called Big Ugly, and there were so many artists on him. It's basically, what if monster trucks had monsters inside of them? It's insane. It's so much fun. Everyone should watch Monster Trucks. It was supposed to be like, I think Paramount's like big franchise, and then it wasn't. It was supposed to be like a trilogy, and it was very much not a trilogy. But yeah, I keep saying like FOM, because FOM was like the title. It was Formula Monsters, but yeah, this Monster Trucks. Crazy show. CR3D is asking, so when recruiters ask me for resumes, should I just send them a link to my portfolio and leave it at that? Yeah, that's a pretty good idea. I prefer to, I think it's a good idea just to have everything in ArtStation, where you can have your entire resume in ArtStation, maybe a link to your LinkedIn as well. But that should really be enough. I don't think there's any reason at all to have stuff in like PDFs and that kind of stuff. That is from the before times. Keep it simple. Honestly, I don't even think that you should have a show reel anymore. I think show reels are antiquated and obsolete and would make no sense at all unless you do something like rigging or animation or something which is shot based, like lighting. Obviously you need some kind of reel when it comes to those kind of things, simply because they are shot based. But if you're doing modeling or texturing, like why would you have that? Just put it in ArtStation. Again, caveat to this is some studios might require it, but I mean, when I was reviewing stuff at DNEG, I was more than happy to just deal with ArtStation. I didn't have there was no point in people spending time on putting it all together in reel, because that can take a long time. A little tip though, this is a little cheeky one, but if you are building a show reel, if you do have to, I recommend looking into like render farms. I had a friend of mine who rendered his entire show reel in like, I think it was 3 minutes. he just set up all the shots on Modo, and then he just paid like, I think it was like 100 euros, 200 euros, and just rendered the entire thing in literally a few minutes. So that's a nice little tip for you if you don't want to go through rendering locally for like 3 months. Howdy Henning, I picked up 3D texturing as a hobby during lockdown, and the tutorials you guys have been making were super useful, and just want to thank you for them and the interesting industry insights. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That's a lot of fun to hear. An unclean hippie asks, do people in the industry talent scout? Can you elaborate on that? Do you mean if like recruiters go on LinkedIn and such? If so, they do. They very much do. It's also one of the things we've been talking about all the time is just, we keep saying this, but don't be a dick. That spreads. If I see there are people who they have so many spicy takes on Twitter about everything all the time, and I don't think that kind of stuff is necessarily a good idea. Assume that, at least if you're looking for a job, assume that that recruiters will be checking out your socials. That is a different discussion entirely, though. The way I'm working now is I'm basically just like kind of just doodling around. I don't really know what I'm doing here. I'm making some kind of character, and then once I'm happy with the current level of resolution, then I'm just adding more. Is zero measure good for animation? It is not good for animation. We have a lot of videos on that actually on our channel from a few years back. Zero measure is not good for animation. Please do not use zero measure for animation. Use proper topology for that. If you're doing a character, if I was doing this for animation, I wouldn't even retopologize them. I would have just had a base mesh ready, and I just would use something like C-wrap on them. Basically meaning you have a base mesh ready and you just wrap the base mesh around this. Just because then you have perfect topology. You might have to add a few loops here and there, but in general, it's just nice and easy to work with. Henning, do you have any advice for somebody who's struggling with learning topology? I mean, we have a lot of tutorials on our YouTube channel about topology. We also have a, hey, here's Mr. Big Ugly again. We also have a course on that as well, which is right here, on how to do topology. I recommend, if you are struggling, you might have hit a plateau. So I recommend finding one of the courses. This is 50% off now for Black Friday, and today is Black Friday. So, you know, we go through a lot of theory when it comes to this, like where do you place the main loops? It's tricky to know what issues you're facing, because with retopology, there are kind of like two issues I think you'll be facing. The first one could be, how do you actually retopo? Like, how do you get the geometry out there? And then the second one is the more fundamental part. Where do you put the loops? Something I just keep talking about when it comes to retopology is a way to optimize your model. Nothing more. If this guy here were to have topology, the only thing that will happen is it's easier to deform this guy. The shape would be exactly the same. Don't just retopologize just to retopologize. If you're just working on a personal project, you know, you don't have to retopologize just for the sake of it. I'll show you guys a project now, which I've been working on a bit in my spare time, which is which kind of explains that. While this is loading, and hopefully this doesn't crash my PC because it's a pretty heavy one. Henning, can you explain the orthographic view? I don't understand why, when you would use it in a stereo perspective view. Yeah, the ortho view is like a mathematical way of looking at your model. Like if you have the model like this, and you're in ortho view, you hit the P key, now you're in ortho view. You hit the P key again, you're in perspective view. The difference is that our eyes perceive the model like this with perspective view. While if you were to look in a purely orthographic view from the side, this is what it looks like. The practical example here is you need to have perspective view enabled, because this is what the camera in 3D is going to look like. If you sculpt like this, then you bring it into Blender or Maya, and it looks, you sculpt like this, and it looks like this. Suddenly the model looks different. So really, there are very few times when doing characters when you want a pure ortho view. It can be handy in a few different cases, but when you're doing particularly sculpting, you really want to stick to just the perspective view, and you want to rotate around. But yeah, let me show you this guy here. This is we're working on a new kit now called the face kit, where we're doing like all these kind of nice little pores and all that, which comes from scans. So you can see all these kind of nice little pores. There is an alpha pack which we'll be releasing probably in January or so. And this guy here, he has UVs and he has topology, but it's zero meshed. You know, the topology is great in terms of what I need. If you look at this looks fine, but it's not animatable. This is not good animatable topology, but it's great for what I need. I need a low-res base which I can easily UV map and it retains the shape, and I can also texture. Then this is perfect for me. Like this is actual perfect topology for me, but it's not perfect for animation. So there's no such thing as perfect topology. If you were to give me like Pixar topology on this guy here, well, that wouldn't be perfect topology. That would be perfect topology if you want to bring this guy into a Pixar pipeline, but it wouldn't be perfect for me. So is auto-ray topology good or bad? It's great. Just know it's a tool and know what the different tools are. Also, here's a fun one. You can see here because of this, you can see I'm actually sculpting upside down. Can't believe none of you told me. So I'll just have to move this guy up like so. There we go. So now he is facing the right way. And then we just enable perspective and enable symmetry again, and there we go. Yeah, so let me be clear, you're sculpting in perspective. You don't want to sculpt in ortho, because then your model is going to look weird when you bring it into for rendering. What and how many 3D software should I know? Well, that depends entirely on what you want to do. The way I see it is, if you, let's say you want to be a modeler, like for sake of argument, you know, that's my background, that's kind of, just for sake of argument, you want to become a modeler. Then you want to learn a main 3D software, what some people call a DCC. That would be something like Maya, Max, or Blender. You want to have a main one there. Just because that's where you're going to be, that's kind of your hub when it comes to 3D. That's where you can model and you can texture, you can animate, you can rig and all that. Which one you use there doesn't necessarily matter that much unless you're looking for employment. If you're looking for employment within the VFX industry, I highly recommend learning Maya. Max or Blender is not that relevant there. If you're doing stuff in your personal stuff or you're a pure freelancer, use whatever you want to be honest. And then you need a texture software, which in this case could be Substance Painter. You also have Mari, but Substance Painter is a really good package. So that's good. Then you might need a sculpting software. Zbrush is fantastic there. And I think that's kind of it for what you really need. Depending on what tool you use as well, you might, like what your main 3D software is, you might need some auxiliary packages. If you're dealing with Blender as your main tool, then I would highly recommend getting something like Rism or Polygon for topology and UVs, just because there are some lacking tools there. What sites do employers actually use to hire for production? Sometimes it's even like social media. They have their own like hiring platforms, so you might have to apply for them. But they will be looking at they will be looking at all sorts of places. They might be looking at Twitter. They might be looking at LinkedIn. You have recruiters who are often looking around and sending people offers or maybe interview requests through LinkedIn. A lot of times, what happens is you get an email from a recruiter being like, "Hey, we're interested. Do you want to have a chat?" So then you don't even have to go looking for them. But basically have a good online presence. Not that you have to keep spamming everything, but show that you are a good candidate online, and have an up-to-date portfolio. You really don't want to have a portfolio that's crazy out of date. There's just no point in that. Keep only current things in your portfolio. No mentioning of Cinema 4D. Yeah, that's correct. If you want to do motion graphics, sure, you learn Cinema 4D, but at least in film and games, Cinema 4D is not really relevant. Yeah, Cinema 4D seems like a great package, but yeah, sorry. Cinema 4D has just never been relevant to the work I am doing, but it seems to be like the industry leader on motion graphics. So if you do that, you know, obviously Cinema 4D is fantastic. Pollux is asking, "Hey Henning, I'm getting into sculpture, currently using Blender for it. Should I learn Zbrush instead or continue with Blender? The UI of Zbrush is what's stopping me from using it." Yeah, I get that. The interface of ZBrush is, how do I put this, not good. I really don't like the interface in ZBrush. And I know how to use it. I made courses on it. I've taught ZBrush a lot, and it's not great. Some people do prefer it, but if you don't like it, you don't like it. But to your question though, not just bashing ZBrush, what is your goal? If you want to just continue sculpting for yourself, then, you know, if Blender gives you the results you want, continue using Blender. It's free, it's easy to use for sculpting, it's fairly powerful. If your goal is to become a professional, then I would say just abandon Blender right away for sculpting and just commit to ZBrush. Just kind of suck it up that it's a bit hard to use. After a while, like what you're seeing me do now, I'm not using any fancy features. I'm using like one brush, and I'm using one material, and I'm using Dynamesh. Like it's very easy to use once you get into it. So the reason I'm saying just like abandon Blender right away is just because there is no point in continuing with that if you have decided to become a professional artist with characters, you just need ZBrush. Blender is just not good enough, and there aren't enough tutorials on it, and it's so recent, it's not tested properly, it's missing a lot of features, and the features that they are just not comparable to ZBrush when it comes to sculpting. So yeah, ZBrush is much better for sculpting, but if you enjoy Blender and it gives you the results you want, then, you know, stick to it. Don't switch software just because. There should always be a reason for switching software. Hey, Andrew is here. Nice seeing you, Andrew. We were just talking about NPC. Yeah, use ZBrush for professional sculpting work. Like it's just no competition there. It's just so far ahead anything else. Blender has had some good sculpting tools in the last year or so, 2 years. It's got a lot better, but better isn't enough to, like, one developer working on that for like a year is not enough to overtake the guy who has been refining their tools for 20 years. What's the best solution for people with low computers? Actually, ZBrush is pretty damn good for people with potato computers. I know that because I had a potato computer. I was talking about this in the last stream, actually, where we the first computer I really had for myself was like a 2006 crappy HP laptop, and honestly, ZBrush runs really well on that. You can't necessarily could do like the 15 million poly stuff, but you can do all sorts of things there. So ZBrush runs incredibly well on low-end hardware, I find. Andrew is asking, Henning, what do you render with these days? Yeah, I'm actually using both Arnold and Cycles. I recently made a tutorial on using Blender for rendering, and I'm trying to do the same tutorial for Maya. But man, Arnold is a heavy boy. Arnold is heavy to use, and it's not very artistically intuitive. It's very powerful. So it depends what I'm doing. If I'm doing like some concepting stuff, then I'm definitely using Blender. It's like much faster for setting it up and just getting it out. But if I'm doing like a character where I need skin shading, I really prefer Arnold, just because I think it just has much better skin shading, and I have more control with it as well. I have more control over the lights, like with light linking if I need something specific there. But yeah, so both Cycles and Arnold. How to make a good portfolio? Yeah, that's a good question. This is a question we keep hearing over and over again. There are two parts to that. The first part is you need the skills to be able to pull it off. I don't think there is any point in figuring out what pieces to make if you genuinely can't pull it off. It would be like studying the techniques for how to lift 350 kilos of deadlift if you can only lift like 100 kilos. So the first part is make sure that you are good enough for that. And one of the ways you can do that is obviously you can ask feedback from people in the industry, but you can also just compare your portfolio to people who have comparable positions. If you're trying to make a portfolio, I reckon you want to become a junior artist. And in that case, it's good to find junior artists in the industry. Like find people who graduated in the last year. You can find them on Twitter. You can ask around. You can find them on LinkedIn. You can search for like Ubisoft, and you can like Ubisoft junior modeler or something, and you can see who graduated last year. And then you can gauge the level there. And then once you have the skills to actually pull it off, now you can deadlift the 350 kilos. Then it's all about what do you put in your portfolio. And I think it's so important that you don't waste time just kind of like, I like to make characters, or I like to do this and that. Figure out what should be in your portfolio. Talk to professionals about what would be needed in the portfolio. Almost like what would make you hire somebody with a portfolio like this. So figure out what you should have in your portfolio, and you cannot know this. You have to talk to people. If you're not in industry, you don't know what the industry is looking for. Stop assuming things and talk to people. Most people are very happy to talk to you as long as you send them a short and polite message. You shouldn't assume anything of them. You shouldn't be rude, and the email can't be too long. That's such an annoying thing. We get an email, and it's like a whole A4 page. The way I solve those emails is I'm like, all right, I'll get back to it, and then like 2 years later I realize I didn't get back to them, just because I can't spend like 40 minutes on an email. But if you were to be like, hey, what should I have in my portfolio? Well, it's easy. I can just reply to you there. But be polite and be brief and respect their time. And when they do reply to you, please say thank you. I'm sure here, like, Andrew's watching as well. Like, I'm sure you've also experienced here that you give people advice and they just go like just radio silence, or they reply thanks period, and you're like, but come on, I spent time on this. I want to at least give me something back there. Like, I found out that some people can do amazing work without really needing to study anatomy, but I case, or at least I like to know some basics. Yeah, I find that very few people can do that. Some people have a somehow better intuitive sense for studying anatomy, but honestly, you need some basic anatomy. But once you have the basics of it, then it's all about observing. Yeah, Andrew was saying the best way is when you write them an essay and they never respond. Yep. When you do actually take the time to respond properly to an email, and then just radio silence, that is frustrating. How often do you burn out? How do you deal with it? I feel this is a pretty common thing among 3D artists. Well, you shouldn't really burn out. Like, burning out isn't like a thing you should just do and then keep doing. Burnout is like a severe medical case, and people are dropping out of the industry because of that. If you find yourself burning out, you need to seriously change your lifestyle or habits, or you have to reevaluate what you're doing. If you burn out, that is like that can take years, like actual years to recover from. I haven't had like proper burnouts before, but I've been pretty close. Before we did FlippedNormals, before we went full time on that, we had another thing as well going. And so we had FlippedNormals, we had that project, and we had our full-time jobs. And that was very, very challenging. There were times where I just felt entirely destroyed. We know now we have one job, which it's still hard, but it's more manageable. But if you find yourself getting to the cusp of burnout, you really, really, really have to change something, because that stuff is not something you just recover from. One of the experiences I had as well was when I was a student. Before I was a student in Denmark, I lived in Norway, and I lived in my parents' place, and I only had high school like 2 days a week. So I had like 5 days just for myself, and I sculpted, a fair bit here and there, and I thought that was a fun thing to do, but I didn't really have any peers around. Then I got to uni in Denmark, and I suddenly had people around me. People kicked my ass, and it was awesome, because for the first time I had like a community around me, and I just worked my butt off. Like I worked so much, like to the point that it was like 3 a.m. That was like a regular occurrence. And within a few months, I had such bad pains in my arm that I thought I might have to drop out of first year. So at that point, I had so much pain that I couldn't really like grip anything. It was really, really bad. That's one of the scariest things, because I didn't know if I could actually continue. Also last year as well, in 2020, I started really having some bad pains in my forearm as well, because I think the same kind of reasons. And then I just switched to an ergonomic mouse. So now I have like a vertical mouse, which helps a lot. So look, just to answer the burnout question, just the first thing you need to do is just take it deadly seriously. You should not go on a cycle of burnout and recovery, burnout and recovery. Just put down boundaries. Like, don't do crazy amount of overtime. Take care of your mental health. Like, meditate if you have to. Go, see maybe a therapist, or have a regular workout schedule. Just take burnout deadly seriously. What do you think about Arnold Gpu? I think Arnold Gpu is super cool, and I think it is nowhere near where it needs to be at the moment. I keep trying to use it, and it just doesn't work. It's just not really, it's just not there yet. But I think once it's there, it's going to be a game changer. GPU rendering is one of those things I just love. It's so much fun. Yeah, somebody was talking about a great FlippedNormals tutorial, Anatomy for Sculptors. Let me find that, because this is actually a fantastic tutorial. Let me find it. It's down here. Here it is. Fundamental Anatomy for Sculptors. This is one of the best courses I've ever seen on Sculptors. Sculpting is one of the few courses, like, honestly, I learned a lot from. You reach a point where a lot of tutorials, they repeat the same thing. I try to not do that in my tutorials, but it's really hard to find fresh content. And what I'm linking to now is absolutely fantastic. It's not one of those, you're not going to learn anatomy A to Z, meaning that it's not going to go through all the muscles. Instead, it's going to be more, okay, this is how I make something look natural. Instead of just assuming we know anatomy, let's genuinely try to make it feel natural. Let's try to make it feel less anatomical. So, yeah, this course is currently 50% off, and it's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, like Andrew is saying here, I never thought it would burn out. It's a real thing. It is. It's one of those things that it happens to other people, and then it happens to you. And once it happens to you, then it's almost like it's too late to fix it then, because there is a reason you have those habits, and it's hard to fix a burnout once you're already in it. You kind of just have to take some time off. You just have to kind of stop what you're doing for some time, and then really reevaluate your routines. If not Arnold, then which GPU render would you recommend for Maya? Like, I haven't used this a lot, but I heard a lot of really good things about Redshift. Redshift seems to be like a crazy cool engine. It seems to be like stupidly fast. V-Ray is also really good. I've been using V-Ray a lot. It's a really, really good engine. I still prefer Arnold, but Arnold for me is the easiest one to use, because you don't really have any settings. You just kind of let it chug through. Yes, you have some samples. So you can change the samples and such, but it's just dead simple to use. Anyone can learn how to use Arnold really fast. It just takes a little bit more patience to use it compared with something like Cycles and Blender. Or really Blender is just not because Cycles, it's because, the whole how everything works in Blender. How every viewport can be a render can technically do it in Maya as well. It's just not as intuitive. Yeah, Octane is also cool. If an intern position requires max Maya, is it okay to send my portfolio done in Blender? Like, it's worth a shot, I guess. But if it is a, you know, if it's an intern position using Max and Maya, the studio would then also be using Max and Maya. And the reality is just that if they're going to hire somebody, they're going to hire somebody they can use pretty much right away. Of course, you can always retrain and all that, but the people who already know Max or Maya, they have a competitive advantage over you. So I highly recommend that at least you learn how to operate the tools. You don't have to become a complete expert in them, but at least to the point that you can kind of get the job done in them. That's kind of a problem with Blender right now. It's just if you like most jobs will require Max or Maya or VFX. It would be almost entirely Maya. Once you're in the company, that might be a little different. Then you might be able to use whatever you want to. But even then, you still need to be able to operate the pipeline, which will be usually rolling around Maya, where you have to publish through Maya. So at least you need to be comfortable with it. Yeah, why hire a Maya user when they can easily pick somebody up who knows the program? That's exactly it. Why would they go with somebody who doesn't know the software if you have somebody with equivalent skills who already knows the software? In an ideal world, yes, there should be time to retrain, but so much is pure project based, and the contract might be like a 3 to 6 month contract. There is no reason to spend time retraining somebody when you don't have to. There were some people in VFX who they really wanted to use their own software, and they just got in trouble all the time because they just refused to stick to the software that the studio was using. What do you think about Nvidia card prices? Well, they seem to be pretty inflated now, don't they? It seems to be pretty hard to get a proper graphics card right now. Yeah, Andre is saying, nice tips, just thinking ways of money. Somebody have to spend their time and money training you to use Maya instead of Blender. It takes months. And also, when it comes to this as well, yeah, it takes time, and yes, time is money, but also you might leave after that. Like, particularly VFX, you know, I keep looking at this maybe through like a VFX lens here, but contracts are pretty short. It's more like, often it's more like gigs, where you might be there for a little bit and then you go somewhere else. If you were talking about like 5-year permanent positions, that would be a different thing. But why spend a lot of time training somebody when you don't have to? How to compose tertiary forms in Zbrush? The way you do that for tertiary forms, you know, let's define that first. That would be like pores. You know, now we're dealing with like this kind of stuff, you know, really fine stuff. The way I prefer to do that is go nuts on the mid frequency. Before you do any of this fancy stuff, get your mid frequency right. It's like, you know, smooth out all the things and then you can see what's there. Get the mid frequency right and then do the tertiary forms. So tertiary is actually not that hard to do. It's more like labor. It takes some time to do. But get the mid frequency right, and it's so much easier to do the fine pores. Do you have a tutorial creating wings using the IMM feather brushes? No, sorry. Wings is one of those tricky things I kind of tend to avoid. Dealing with feathers is just tricky. If you want to become an animator, what do you recommend to get knowledge? I bought the P2 design course and I'm practicing. We want to build more experience practice. I use Maya and Blender. Yeah, so the course he's talking about is Pierrick. Let's see if you can find him here just by searching. That our guess would be this course, which is the Alive, which is currently 25% off. This is an incredible course. So yeah, starting with this is definitely a good idea. Animation, obviously I'm not an animator. I'm not going to give too much in-depth knowledge on how to become an animator. But something which is different with animation versus regular 3D is, you know, we keep talking about like here, like I'm basically obsessed about the idea like basics versus fundamentals. When it comes to animation, the basics are not that tricky. Of course, they can get technical, but it seems like animation is very much a deep fundamentals way of doing it. Like you have to understand acting. So be aware that you're not spending all your time learning how to just operate graph editor, all of the fancy tricks there, but you actually have to learn acting, and that is tricky. You have if you want to become an animator as well, you have some really good courses, like proper like long form ones, like Animation Mentor as well. So I will look into some of those. I think it's really, really, really important to get feedback on your animation. So check out something like Animation Mentor. I think it's just animationmentor.com. Who does this Sculpt remind me of? Yeah, I have honestly no idea. I'm just doodling here. You know how we keep talking about, you know, you should use reference, kids. Use reference for everything. So, you know, I don't remember have reference for this. I probably should. But you know, the point is just like doing some sculpting and just doing a Q&A. Just saying thanks for what you're doing. Going to get some tutorials today. Keep improving. The stream is also very helpful. Wish you would stream more often. Thanks. Yeah, it would be fun to stream more often. We're pretty strapped for capacity right now internally in the company, so it's hard to find time to stream. I really enjoy streaming. It would be really fun to get Morten on these streams as well. It's just tons of fun to do. But yeah, I would love to do more streams. In production, will there be clients who do not have a clear idea of what they want, which leads to endless changes and tight deadlines? Yes, I'm not sure if you were here when I was talking about this amazing, not monster calls, monster trucks. Talking about monster trucks, let's find this one again. This was one of those projects that the client basically had no idea what they wanted, where it was just all over the place and just insanity ensues, where there are constant design revisions. I think at some point there was like over 1,000 versions of this guy here, completely insane. And he looks fine, you know, he doesn't look bad, but he looks fine. He doesn't look like there was 1,000 versions of him. You know, this should not be that hard to make. So it's one of the hard things that if you're dealing with clients, some of them will just genuinely not know what they want. It's much easier to work with someone who's demanding, but at least they have an exact idea. Some people are just like, yeah, I'll kind of know when I'll see it. That is very tricky, because oftentimes the deadlines don't really change. Do you find it difficult to find good texture references? IG objects that have that kind of wear level you're looking for, the right kind of colors. Yep. When I'm doing texturing, it's always one of the hard things is finding the reference. That is tricky. Like when it comes to sculpting, you can kind of make up a lot of things, but when it comes to texturing, I just need a lot more very specific reference. And one of the reasons is because you're projecting a lot of things. Here I've been doing sculpting for a long time. I have a bit more of like an intuitive sense of how something works, even though it's still in reference here. But in texturing, I really need highly specific reference. So yeah, that is hard. It's really hard to do that. The first thing though, which genuinely helps me finding references, first, what are you doing? What do you want it to be like? If you just search for like wear and tear, that's hard. It's easier to figure out exactly what you want and then find reference like that. And then just be on a search constantly for reference. Just be on the lookout and save this in a giant folder. And then once you need a reference, you can start looking there. I have a giant reference folder I've been collecting for like almost a decade now. So whenever I need reference, I can always just start there. And then whenever you make some cool smart materials or you grade some nice images, put them into like a reference folder as well. Can you tell us all the characters you worked on in the industry? No, that would take some time, I think. I can tell you some of them. Let's go back to this. Let's see, Monster Calls. This is one of the most fun ones I worked on. It was a tiny team. At least, in the beginning. It turns out there were more people, a lot more people in the end. But this was a really fun one. It's a very sad story, but we got a scan of the head here. Then we got some basic concept of the body. And the scan of the head was like a real world sized thing. It was pretty crazy. But yeah, we had to model this guy up from and we had to do a lot of redesigns on his face to make it work and all that. So this was a really fun project to do. I think I was on it for 6 to 8 months or so back in 2015. Yeah, really enjoyed this one. A very challenging project, very small team. It was one of those where it was just really nice. The director is a really good director and actually knows what he's doing. Then it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure when it's more like a linear thing that you do one day work and you one day closer to the deadline. The hard ones are the ones that they have no idea. That was like Pacific Rim. They had no idea what they actually wanted, and that is very challenging. Can be fun as well, because everything is on fire all the time, which can be fun if you enjoy that. But yeah, some projects are really tricky like that. Tua is saying, great movie. Yeah, it is. Monster Calls is fantastic. What's the step after UV mapping and before texturing? You mentioned extracting displacement maps, but I got lost in the definition of said maps and how to make, let's see, scroll up here, and how to make them what to use for. Okay, so what are the steps between like UV mapping and texturing? I mean, you kind of get started with texturing pretty much right away afterwards. What you do though when you start texturing is often based on the sculpt you have, or based on the asset you have. You extract certain maps that can help you. It's not necessarily essential, but it can really help you. So if you have something like this, then before texturing, I would have extracted a displacement map for this. Oh no, we are going to quick save mode. Okay, there we go. So here I would have extracted all of this as like a proper map. Just because it's so much easier to texture it, I would have extracted ambient occlusion maps from it, cavity maps. It just makes it a lot easier to texture, but you don't have to. You could hand paint this entirely from scratch as well, which would work fine. So yeah, the steps between UV mapping and texturing is prepare your model, get it into Mari or Painter, and then start working on it. And then in those software, bake the maps you need. Kaiser is saying, hey, a little hello from France. We really love your content, never stop producing. Well, thank you. And a little appreciation from Copenhagen, I suppose. Arkin Rao says, you worked on Pacific Rim. No, I worked on Pacific Rim 2, which is a very different movie. Notable difference is the first one is good. The second one is it's not good. It's a fun movie, but it's not great. Can we start as a character artist right away in the industry? It's possible. People have done it. If you are prepared enough to do it. The problem is that you don't really, in games it might be different, but in film at least, you don't necessarily really have like junior character art positions, because it exists, but it's tricky. It's easier to do like starting with a prop that you have like a background prop, you have a hammer, and it's more like a simple thing. But all characters are pretty hard, like by definition. You don't necessarily have a lot of simpler ones there. But it is possible, but you do have to be prepared that you need a pretty legit portfolio. You can't have like a simple portfolio and get accepted. You need to have something that shows a lot of promise. But you know, it's absolutely possible. Absolutely. Best website about the CG 3D world, like CG channel. One of which I'm enjoying, we actually have ads there now, is 80 level. 80.lv. These guys have a lot of cool news as well. So they have news about the industry. You know, I'm not affiliated with these guys at all. I don't really check them that often, to be perfectly honest. But these guys do a lot of cool stuff. They have a lot of, yeah, just a lot of interesting things. Not seeing any FlippedNormals ads here, though. I would like to see some FlippedNormals ads. And just a quick reminder that we have our Black Friday sale going on right now, which is 50% off nearly all courses and assets on the marketplace. Like this one, making hair for games in Blender. So if somebody's interested in making hairs in games in Blender, this is a fantastic one. We released this fairly recently, and it's a really cool one. Henning, how long are you streaming for? Andrew asks. Yeah, maybe like 45 minutes more or something. I'm not actually sure how long we've been going for now. I can't actually see that on the timeline. Let's see here. We've been going for, wow, almost 2 hours. 1 hour, 40 minutes. Yeah, probably like an hour or so more. 45 minutes. How did you sculpt the sharks from Pirates, and how did you get hired? Yeah, that's a good question. That was one of the ones that we were supplied with some scans of some real world set sharks, which they use. You can see those in the actual movie. They're like entirely deflated. So we took those and we like redesigned them pretty much entirely. Just be like, oh cool, those ones are not really a starting point. So we just have to redo that. So well, not so much we, it was more me. There wasn't really a lot of people on that. It was a pretty understaffed show, I think. So I was just looking at a lot of reference for different sharks. There was a tiger shark, a hammerhead, and a great white, and just kind of sculpted them up and kept the forms clean and kept the zombie elements of the sharks in there and really tried to put them in there. I was complaining because we needed to have ribs, and sharks don't have ribs. Learned that through the movie. But they were like, no, it need to have ribs. All right, cool. You're paying the bills. And then we actually, this is a little secret, but we actually used sear measure on those. The designs kept changing so much that, and they deformed not a whole lot, I suppose. It was more like wiggly stuff. So sear measure actually worked really well there. And then we did some like manual topology on top of them as well, because, you know, not everything fits there. But that was actually a good case of sear measure. Yeah, Andrew and I here, we actually worked on Pirates together, where he did like a really nice like silent Mary ship, and I was in the creature department. Also did a lot of like, worked on a lot of like ghost pirates and such. It was a really fun show. It was a pretty crazy one. Again, not a particularly good movie though. That seems to be like a thing. If you go into VFX and you try to, you know, and you want to work on good movies, that's a little bit hit and miss. And sometimes you work on good movies and you don't have a good experience, and sometimes you have good experience and it's not a good movie. One of the most fun things I worked on, which I sometimes just think it might have been a fever dream, was when I worked on Ghostbusters 2016. One of the craziest things I've ever worked on, which was, I loved it. I really enjoyed the chaos for some reason. But, you know, it's not a good movie. Yeah, like Andrew says here, most movies I worked on bad, but good VFX. Do you watch the movies you work on? Sometimes, I suppose. I probably watched maybe like half of them. I worked on The Mummy, Ghost in a Shell, not really seen those. So, yeah, you know, sometimes you watch them, sometimes you don't. If it's a good movie or something you're generally proud of, then you'll watch it. But it depends a little bit what you're doing as well. If it's a kind of a crap movie and you know it's crap and you don't really care about what you worked on, then it's, you don't really care. And also like the crew screenings were also like at like 9 o'clock in the morning at like Leicester Square. So if you work on something that's not crazy inspiring, you don't necessarily want to do that. And Toro says, just to let you know, I visited 8th level now and I got a really nice FlippedNormals banner. Yay! Thank you. We spent a lot of time on that, making sure the banners are nice. Is there any industry standard average polygon for CG characters for movies or video games? Honestly, for games, there might be. I don't know. I don't want to say stuff about. I don't want to talk about stuff I don't know too much about. But for movies, I don't really have a poly count per se. The difference between film and games is that for film you optimize more for the final quality, while for games you actually have to make sacrifices for performance. In movies, you have like different versions of the rig. You have like a more low res version which the animators can work with, then you might have like a render version as well. So you kind of need as many polygons as you need. Some characters are simple, some characters are complicated. You place as many polygons as you need in order for it to work. Have you ever gotten carpal tunnel syndrome from sculpting? Oh boy, have I got that. I'm not entirely sure if it was carpal tunnel or like there are many names for those kind of things, like RSI, carpal tunnel. I've had basically everything in my arms, which is why I now really spend a lot of money on good chairs. When I'm sculpting for longer periods of time, I'm very religious about taking breaks. What I did when I was in school as well, I had like a timer which would pop up every like 15 or 20 minutes being like, hey buddy, time to chill out now. Look at something far away, stop working, stretch your arms. And while that was infuriating to no end, it doesn't matter, you just have to take breaks. So yeah, I mean, a lot of people I work with have had issues with their arms. It's funny when you attend when you go to school and you see the students there. First year, they're all just like working until like midnight and they're all just so youthful and energetic. Second year, some of them are starting to have issues with their arms and such, and you're seeing some people wear like some like supporting braces around their arms and a few of those things. And then third year, they were like 80 years old and they're all just like wearing braces on everything. It is really interesting to see how big of a difference is just between those years, just because they've been working so hard. Which is also how you're gonna get better, right? So it's a tricky thing. It's like, how do you balance it? Well, you only figure that out once you get hurt. We all, particularly when you get started, you're like 19, 20 years old, and of course you are invincible, and then you aren't anymore, and then you got to figure that out. So what I actually have now, I have like a drawing glove. I don't think it's in production anymore. It's called Doki wear. There we go. Let's see here. This one, Doki wear. I've been trying to get one, but due to the pandemic, I don't think you can actually get one right now. But it's a glove that looks like this. I'm wearing one right now. It's like 5 years old and it has tons of holes in it. Probably shouldn't wear this glove anymore. But it's a really nice glove. You can probably find this on Amazon. Just search like drawing glove. I have exactly this one, just with a different color. And this has saved my hand a lot as well, because it means that my hand moves so much smoother on the tablet. So there's significantly less friction on my hand. So this one has really saved me. It's like if I'm sculpting and I don't have one of these guys, I'll put a towel or something under my hand and I'll just use that, because I am very afraid of getting injured, because I have really been injured before, and that is just not fun. So like I highly recommend like either like buy like a cheap glove and cut holes in it or something, or just take breaks. Do studios expect us to know specific renderers the same way we got to know about Max or Maya as 3D software? Now, render engines are a bit different, because while some studios might be using Arnold or RenderMan or Mantra or whatever, their interface is entirely different. So it's like you might be using Arnold, but it doesn't matter, because they're using a proprietary solution for it. They might be using a software called Katana, which they interface into, and you can't learn Katana from like personally. Even if you did, it would be a different version of it. So render engines are a bit different, and also all render engines are pretty much the same, honestly, when it comes to it. And when it comes to lighting a shot and such, they're very, very similar, particularly the ones that the big studios are using. So I would be much more focused on getting good at lighting, or, you know, doing the slap comps and making a shot look beautiful instead of worrying too much about the specific render engine. I'm gonna put some eyes in this guy as well. Maybe, here's an idea, maybe I should save this project. I've been working on this for like almost 2 hours and I haven't saved once. You know, now I'm saving it in a folder called delete on desktop. So, you know, don't do what I say, or don't do what I do what I say. And this will be called man.ctool. So I will have no idea what this guy is later on. But you know, that's how it worked. I'm more like, put it on Dropbox, name it correctly, save every 5 minutes, and I put it in the delete folder and I call it man. So, you know, it is what it is. Yeah, so I'm just gonna clean up the chat a little bit right now. Pro tip, don't save. I mean, yes, I suppose. Do you have any courses on animating in Maya? Yes, we do. Let's try the good old animation Maya. We have some pretty cool courses here. We have, this guy's really good. He has a lot of really cool courses. Let's see, I'll place this in the chat here. So he has a lot of really nice courses, more focused on he has a lot of intro courses, but more focused on animation than the other one. The course I have, or the one, you know, the one I made, the one we have here, Introduction to Maya, that's more focused on, it's like simpler, while the other ones here, they cover more things. I prefer, obviously, you know, I prefer the course we made because we made it, but the reason I prefer that is because it's more focused. It focuses more on learning Maya, while the other ones is more like effects and rigging and that kind of stuff, which is very useful. Just a different way of doing it. The effects school or self-learning? That depends entirely on what it is you want to learn, how self-motivated you are, and if it's a good school. Self-learning versus a bad school, and high debt, you know, self-learning. But a good school with low debt is good. But problem with schools is that you can have a significant amount of student loans at the end. So just be aware of that. It's not just as simple, should I go to school or should I not go to school? It can be, should I be in debt for 30 years or should I do some, you know, FlippedNormals courses? It's not that simple. Of course, it's not that simple, but you can simplify it down into that. You know, if you're learning something, you need basically a community as well, which is actually kind of reminds me, I should probably plug our Discord as well, where we have a pretty nice FlippedNormals Discord. So if anyone is actually looking for a community, I'll send an invite here. If I can figure out how Discord works, I should probably learn this by now. So let's find this here. So this is here's a link to the FlippedNormals Discord. Yeah, if you want to learn as well, yeah, Andrew was saying I'm self-taught. It's definitely doable, but you've got to be disciplined. It's 100% doable. It is tricky. If you have a community around you and you have good tutorials and you have somebody to hold you accountable, it's absolutely doable. Some people really have a hard time with being self-taught, and some people like are doing way better. Even though I attended uni, like I kind of consider myself self-taught. It sounds a little weird, but I learned most things in 3D. I feel I learned before I attended uni, and then I learned a lot of art stuff in uni, and I refined my skills. But I still honestly consider myself self-taught, even though I attended uni. It's a bit of a weird one, but. Any beginner courses to Zbrush? Oh boy, do we have beginner courses to Zbrush. Let's see here. So here are two. Here's actually a good one. Here's a bundle which contains a lot of different courses. Specifically, there is an intro to Zbrush right here. Here's actually an interesting comment by Scope King 1994. I've realized I can hear something 1,000 times and I won't understand it until I face it mid-project. That is so true. We keep, like a specific example is, we've spoken about this in videos before, is whenever I'm teaching sculpting, we're starting off with, okay, so the most important thing is get the bones right, you know, put in the skeleton, then you put in the muscle, then you put in the fat, then you put in the skin. Cool, now you have a recipe for it. If you follow that, you should have a recipe for how to sculpt. And then I feedback that, and they were like, yeah, that of course makes sense. I realize that people have bones. That's just obvious, Henning. Stop talking to me, stop talking nonsense. I know I have a skeleton inside of me. And then I give them feedback, and they're like, hey, you remember when you said you knew you had a skeleton inside of you? You forgot to put a skeleton inside a character. And they're like, oh yeah, that's what you meant. Yeah, that's what I meant. So you just really, like, it's like you can have somebody tells you some wisdom, but you don't understand it until it applies to you. Solid Air is saying, hey, I'm a bit confused why you reckon Blender will be the industry standard in the next 10 years. Any insights and your thoughts? I don't think Blender will be the industry standard in 10 years. I think it will. I think it was going to take up more and more and more of the. I think it's gonna grow in the industry, but it depends which industry as well. You know, if for concepting, it's gonna take over a lot of things. Everyone doing concept art in 10 years is gonna be using Blender. For modeling, a lot of people will be using Blender. The effects studios, I think they're adopting Houdini faster than adopting Blender. I think Houdini is going to take over a lot of where Maya currently is. I mean, for good reason as well. Houdini is a fantastic tool, but I don't see any evidence that Blender is gonna eat up like the rendering part of a project or the rigging or animation part of a project. I don't see any reason why that should happen, just because that's not what Blender has been good at. Like currently, the weaknesses of Blender for me is like scene management and can't group things and all these kind of things. While Houdini is already amazing at all of those things. If you need to light like 200 shots, try to do that in Blender in a collaborative environment. Try to do it in Blender and it's very painful. Try to do it in something like Houdini or Katana and it's manageable. You can actually build infrastructure for that. So I really don't think Blender is gonna be the software. I think it's gonna be a software. I think it's gonna be a very important software, but yeah, it is not gonna be the one that just eats up everything. I don't think it wants to be that either. I mean, it's a very like something like Cycles versus Arnold. They're two completely different things. It's not. I'm not sure if one wants to become the other. Yeah, Naiwa is, how we pronounce that, sorry for that, is saying Blender being free will definitely help small studios. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, one of the reasons why it's gaining so much popularity. It's a fantastic tool. It's a free tool. You can't underestimate the chance or you can't underestimate the competitive advantage something has being free. But on the other hand, if you're a bigger studio or if you need to build a pipeline, you don't really care about the tool being free because you want like a good tool. You want something that's reliable and solid, and Blender is not a reliable and solid pipeline tool, like nowhere remotely close to that, not compared to Katana and Houdini at least. Did you sculpted Venom? No, I didn't sculpt Venom. I textured a bit on Venom though, and I sculpted a bit on the other guy, Riot. Was that Riot? Yeah, I think it was Riot, and there was the other guy in the new movie. Yeah, that's years ago now. But yeah, I sculpted a fair bit on Riot. For that, we had approximately 2 pages of 2 drawings from a comic book to look at for reference. So that was fun. We didn't really have anything there. Yeah, I spent some months on texturing for Venom, that is one of the most frustrating shows I've ever worked on. That was one of those not enjoyable ones. Nick is saying, hey Henning, do you have any plans for making an Unreal Engine 5 film course? Not right now, but I would love to make Unreal Engine 5 courses. I don't want to make any courses, or we don't want to make any courses right now on Unreal at all, because, you know, it's not out yet. No, not properly out. I want to, before we invest a lot of time and money into making proper courses for that, we want to make sure that it's gonna, you know, be relevant for some time. It's also a problem with new software. Like, you know, it's a beta and it's just keeps changing. So I think you should expect Unreal Engine 5 courses or UE5 courses from us at some point, but we haven't committed to anything. But I think that's where it makes sense as well. That's actually an interesting one with the whole industry standard Blender taking more over. I think Unreal is also taking more over as well. I think Unreal is going to be used more and more in film. Particularly like previs, or, you know, a lot of rendering can be done directly in Unreal Engine. Now, like for instance, Nuke just launched showed their Unreal bridge as well, which is fantastic, super cool that you can actually have a Nuke bridge directly to UE5 or UE4. Which software do you recommend for a beginner to learn? Depends what kind of software it is. If it's general 3D software, I recommend Blender actually. Blender is free, it's easy to pick up. It's not particularly easy. It's not easier than other software, I think, but it's easy. It's accessible. It's way more accessible. So yeah, I recommend that. What software do you recommend for rigging? Maya seems to be the one people are using for rigging, at least. Most professional character rigging jobs seems to be done in Maya. Though if somebody who's actually a rigger watches this, feel free to correct me there. But that seems to be the way it's been done at the moment. Speaking of Unreal, any thoughts about MetaHuman? Yeah, MetaHuman looks crazy powerful. That looks like a phenomenal tool. I haven't used it personally, but it looks just great. I don't really have any critique of that. Do you like 3D code at all, or do you feel Zbrush is a bit superior for sculpting? I mean, Zbrush is the best sculpting tool out there. 3D code has some cool voxel tools and such, but I mean, like Zbrush is like, you would never use 3D code for like anything like serious compared to in sculpting, at least, you know, compared to Zbrush. I'm happy to be proven wrong here, but like no professional sculptor, or at least 99.9% of professional sculptors will be using Zbrush, and there is a reason for that. Do you still have the PRX alive? Blender animation course on your website? Oh boy, do we have a live here. I actually have it open as a tab because it's so good. It's 25% off now as well, which is probably the best animation course like made, I think, available. Just a phenomenal tool. Or just a phenomenal animation course. I mean, everything Pierrick does is just brilliant. He made this as well, effective rigging in Blender as well, which is just brilliant as well. I'll leave a link here as well. These two are some of the most high quality courses we have. Alive is actually the best selling course we have on FlippedNormals in all of 2021, which I'm a little bitter about because I have a fair few courses on FlippedNormals in 2021, but you know, gotta give Pierrick that hat. No, it's very, very, very impressive to see what Pierrick is able to do. Yeah, here's a good question. Essentially, the question is, should I learn to draw or not? And I answered that early in the stream, but like I think if you want to be better at 3D, you should just do 3D. If you want to learn to draw is such an insanely complicated task. It's not just I'll pick up a pencil and do some things. There are so many things you have to just understand about drawing. I think it's a much better idea to focus that effort on learning 3D. If you want to become a concept artist or illustrator, that changes. Then I think it's worth learning to draw. But if you want to become a character artist, you are not going to be drawing. You are going to be sculpting. Spend that time on the sculpting. It's like, does it help if you can draw? Yeah, sure. But if let's say it takes you like 500 hours to learn how to draw, is it better to spend 500 hours sculpting? Oh yeah, I mean, without any doubt. But you know, just make sure you spend those 500 hours on good, solid fundamental skills. Yeah, Spitz9 says, no need to learn to draw for 3D. It helps though. Yeah. But caveat here again is it helps if what the drawing you've been doing has been like fundamental understanding of things. It doesn't help just learning how to draw. I could have swore I was doing some eyes on this guy before, and then I forgot to do eyes on him. Let's see if I can just steal the eyes from this guy here. Yeah, I think I can. You guys just distract me with all your fun questions. This guy here, the vampire guy, was actually inspired by a Netflix show I watched called Midnight Mass. I highly recommend that show. It has some really cool, interesting work. It's always funny when you're adding eyes and they look silly because like you have very serious characters, and then they look funny because the eyes are silly. Habibi says, I've been sculpting for 6 months, sculpting in Zbrush for about 6 months and looking to get an anatomy course for purchase. There are a few on FlippedNormals. Which one do you recommend? There are a few I do recommend. I recommend Introduction to Sculpting. That's not an anatomy course, but it's something more fundamental, I think. Intro to Sculpting. Intro to Sculpting is great. I mean, again, I'm biased. I made it, so there's that. But Intro to Sculpting is great because it teaches you the more fundamental part of sculpting, and then you can combine that with, I believe it's down here, Fundamental Anatomy for Sculptors. These two courses combined are really solid. Maybe even add in a little bit of Intro to Zbrush as well. So these two will take you a fair bit of distance there. They're not going to be the end goal. You still have to learn muscles, like actually learn the muscle layout. But it's more of a, while it's important to learn the muscles, that like you can have somebody who knows every single muscle, but they can't produce amazing sculpts. Or you can have the opposite. You can have somebody who has a basic understanding of the muscles, but they're so good at observing. And that's what we're talking about in those courses there. Particularly like the last one I linked there, Fundamental Anatomy for Sculptors, is made by an absolute legend when it comes to sculpting. Like when it comes to sculpting, like I'm decent at sculpting when it comes to it. Like I can sculpt kind of most things with reference and digital and all that. But the guy who's teaching the other course, he's not like a little bit better than me. He's like a teacher of classical sculpture at, I think, Academy of in Barcelona. Like that's just a whole different level. Like he would be my teacher and he would kick my ass in the first 2 years, and then I would probably be allowed into the graces after some years there. So it's a different kind of sculpting. One is more practical, which is, you know, my approach to sculpting is fairly practical, and his approach to sculpting is obviously practical as well, but more like fundamental. Hello all, Paul says. Well, hello Paul. If you want to be more successful in the 3D industry, do you think it's more beneficial to be a generalist or a specialist? Well, I actually have something here which is interesting. There's a book called Range, which I highly recommend. This book here, Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. This one here, obviously I don't have a affiliate link, it's Amazon. This is a fantastic book which kind of it talks about generalization versus specialization. It depends what you specialize, but like back to CG, it depends what you specialize in. There isn't an answer there. It depends entirely what industry it is and what you want to do. If you want to be in VFX, that lends itself more to specialization. If you want to work in commercials, that lends itself more to generalization. If you want to work in games, that seems to be very much specialization and very technical things. So it depends. If you are a creature modeler and you want to work at like something like the Mill, where they do more commercials and such, they're like, cool, you can do all these high-end creatures, but we don't actually have that much work for it. Or if you are a mill generalist, want to work in film, they're like, cool, you're very general, but we need very specialized people here because we have such a high bar for very specific things. And we have so many people working on things. So it really just depends on what you want to do. So much knowledge here in the stream. I really appreciate your time here. Much love. Thank you very much. I really appreciate people watching this. I mean, it's fun for me as well. It's really fun just like sculpting here and talking to you guys. Recommending Amazon books. I do really recommend the book I recommended here, Range. It really changed my view on a lot of different things. Kind of off topic here, Nick is asking, kind of off topic, but one I wondered about for a while. Would you and Morten ever open your production house, or do you want to make short film? No. In short, I have no interest in that. I want to keep building the company and do 3D almost like a bit as a hobby when it comes to like making my characters and such. But I don't actually have a need for telling stories like that. It's a bit of an interesting one. Like, it seems like there are kind of two kinds of people in the industry. You have, of course, there are more simplified down two kinds. You have people who really enjoy like art and expressing themselves, and they just have to do more art. And then you have people like myself who's more technical, who enjoy more the tech part of it and learning about different software and techniques and all that, and more like about building stuff by itself. It sounds weird, but I don't really care about art per se. I think there's a lot of beautiful art, but I'm not an artist. I'm more like an engineer. If I wasn't doing 3D, I might have been legit doing like engineering or software engineering or something like that. So for me, like the whole making a short film or something isn't that interesting, and I just have no interest in opening a production studio for doing commercials. I think there are, or movies or anything like that. I think there are so many people who will be much better at that than I would. And I think we're pretty good at making tutorials. At least, I like to hope that. That's what I enjoy doing now. I think it's really fun to do that. Here's an interesting one, an unclean hippie. Many questions for you, I appreciate that. This is a more location-specific question, but do you find that particularly working in Europe, there are language barriers, or do you find that most people in studios speak English? Yeah, I mean, where I worked in Europe, I'm kind of a bad example here, because I worked in the UK, where everyone obviously speaks English, apart from, a lot of Italians and French people there. Most people speak English. And then I worked in Norway, where I spoke Norwegian, so I'm terrible there. Europe is also so large. I mean, there are like 50 countries here, and so many different cultures. It depends where it is. I think, though, in general, VFX or 3D studios are very international. Like, for instance, where I'm now in Denmark, I don't think you can find a single studio here where you wouldn't be fine with just English. I mean, all of Scandinavia would be totally fine. 3D in general is just remarkably international, which is fantastic. Will you ever do a breakdown or reaction video for VFX in movies that you did or didn't work on? Yeah, the breakdowns are hard, because then you actually need like material. Like we don't have any of the material. We don't have any of the source files. We can't do breakdowns. We can do like React videos, and we can comment on things and all that. And we did a little bit of that some years ago. We gave our thoughts to like some trailers and such, like a Spider-Man trailer and some more things, which was fun to do. And we can talk about it, but we can't actually do breakdowns, because then you need inside knowledge. And particularly the stuff we worked on now is, those shows have probably been archived way like long ago. You probably can't even find in files. And even if you could, I mean, for particularly the last studio I worked on, like we weren't even allowed to show any of the stuff we worked on, like outside of like password protected walls. I couldn't upload anything to ArtStation just because of that. So yeah, it's a tricky one. Yeah, Paul is saying everyone speaks English in industry. Yeah, it's a really international industry. I mean, you kind of have to speak English in order to learn 3D. Here's a good question. Is it fine to completely disregard animation if I have no interest in it, or should I have at least basic? I think it's useful to have a basic understanding of the tools, like how to use the graph editor and how to, you know, make a turntable and such. Basic camera moves. But in terms of character animation, it's so different from anything else we're doing. It's not like you're a character modeler and you learn a little bit of texturing, which are a lot of overlap. Like it's entirely a different thing. It's like I'm a character modeler and I need to learn acting. Like it's just two unrelated skills, and you're never going to use it unless, you know, you want to become an animator. But I personally don't find there to be any reason for anyone to learn animation unless you want to become an animator. If you're a generalist, it could make sense as well, because sometimes you need to do like camera shots and light character animation. But I don't think there's any reason to spend time on that. You know, people can definitely disagree with me there, but I've gone my entire career without really animating anything, apart from, you know, again, camera moves and such. It is handy to be able to do that. Alex is a good question. Hey, Henning, how are you doing? I have a question. I have a concern. I'm inspiring. I aspire to work in production, but I'm a shy person, and that worries me a little. Luckily, this seems to be an industry just made by introverts. You really don't find a crazy amount of like very vocal people. I think one of the reasons is in order to get good in this field, you just need to dedicate time to yourself in your own room. And a lot of it. While in order to get good in some other fields, like, I don't know, sales or banking or something, you have to be social and network a lot like that. So I've met so many incredibly shy people in this industry who are absolutely lovely people. I wouldn't be worried about that, to be honest. How do you know when to stop doing the animation and start subdividing? Good question. I did that not too long ago. When the shape is done, when the design is done, obviously this here guy is still pretty rudimentary, but I'm not going to take him that much further. If I was adding another horn, if I was adding horns or some crazy hair or some spikes or something, then I would have kept him dynameshing. But now it's more like I need to refine where he's at. There is no reason to... Like, you don't want to just dynamesh forever, because it's much easier to work on a subdivided mesh. But you don't want to subdivide too early either, because then you can't change the design. There's a crunch in the VFX industry. Not to the same extent as there's crunch in the games industry. There's definitely overtime though. I was lucky I didn't really do overtime, at least not a lot. But you don't have crunch to the same extent, no. There seems to be a game industry thing, which is disgusting. Like, it really pisses me off that you have the crunch culture there, because I just see people getting burned out. Like, it seems to be like it seems to be like a genuine problem with the entire industry. Yeah, Kaiser is asking if he can show me his characters to have feedback on it. Right now, I'm crazy busy with all sorts of stuff, but feel free to join our Discord server, which I can give you a link to now, and you can ask there. I'm in the server, so I might check it out, but I can't promise you that I can give you individual feedback, unfortunately. It's beginning to look like a character you would see in Dishonored 2. Yeah, I mean, Dishonored was kind of my jam. There was a question earlier, what was your biggest art inspiration? Dishonored. Dishonored 1, not Dishonored 2. Dishonored 1 is more... it is great as well. Dishonored 1 just has more like edgy characters. Like in a very... Not in a humor way, but like they're just more angular. Is being a generalist harder than specializing? I don't think so. They're different things. It's kind of like you have 100 skill points. Put them in different things. Specializing, you're putting 50 in like maybe 2 skills, and generalizing, you're putting like 10 in a bunch of different ones. So yeah, it's not different. You have to, when you're specializing, you have to be basically an expert at a small field. Well, if you are a generalist, you have to be okay at a lot of different things. And what you have to be good at when you're a generalist is you have to be really good at learning new things. They might be like, hey, can you do like a groom for a cat? And you're like, I've never done grooming before. Yeah, sure I can, because you learn how to groom really fast. But it's also not going to look as good as somebody who's obviously a professional at grooming. But it also wouldn't be expected of you either. Do you intend on doing any more portfolio review videos? That would be a lot of fun. I'm not going to commit to doing that at this point, but I would love to do more portfolio videos. That's a ton of fun. I would love to get started with like regularly scheduled streams like this as well. That'd be a lot of fun, but not for some time, to be honest. Lev is asking, your thoughts about Quixel Mixer versus Substance Painter? I really enjoy listening to the stream. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I haven't used Mixer a whole lot. It looks really cool. I don't honestly have a whole lot of thoughts about that. I want to be very honest when I don't know something. And yeah, just a reminder that we still have our 50% sale off here on the FlippedNormals marketplace. I recommend just having a browse around, seeing like introduction to sculpting, creating hair, introduction to Zbrush, alive, lighting scenes, sculpting faces. Here's a cool one. This is actually a really fun one, which we got by another fellow Norwegian, Lasse Ostanden. Really nice tutorial on professional skin texturing in Mari and Arnold. I'll leave a link to this as well. Just how to actually do professional level skin shading. This is something I haven't really seen too many tutorials about using Mari. I would love to make a tutorial like this as well. And I'm working on something like that for Substance Painter. I got some clay brushes recently. I kind of want to try these guys out. There are a lot of them though. So let's see if I can experiment a little bit with these brushes. I think this was one I enjoyed. Yeah, this one I enjoyed using. So now I'll try to make the character feel a little bit more clay-like. Let's just see some more questions as well. Yeah, so like Kaiser was saying here, like he just posted his art in the art feedback channel. If somebody's interested in getting feedback on our work, we have a quite active Discord community, which you're more than welcome to join. I'm more in like the general chat channel, the chit chat channel. More just shit posting, but it's a really fun community. A lot of really good people there. So we'll continue this just for just a few minutes longer. So drop your questions and I'll see if I can get to them. This is actually a really good one. How much time do you spend on a study? Like I'm doing some mentorships now, or like I'm hosting some mentorships where I have 2 students at the moment. And one of the things I always try to do is I try to limit the max time. I actually set a max time for a study Because is it best to do a 10-hour study, or is it best to do 10 studies for an hour each? And like, at least in the beginning, it's so much better to do 10 studies for an hour each. You learn so much more per study. What I'm seeing is, when I'm giving assignments here, that if the students were to spend, let's say they spend 2 hours on a sculpt, which is what I tend to give them. If they spend 2 hours on it, and now they kind of reached the maximum they can do in order to make it look good, because at that point you need feedback. So now if you were to spend another 2 hours on it, now you just kind of noodle around and you would just work a little bit more on some of the same areas, but you wouldn't improve it. So instead of that, scrap it, start a new one, and then learn something new from that as well. So for me, it's something like, at least when you're learning something new, and you're not doing master studies, something like 2 hours is a really good mark. But I also recommend doing different kinds of studies, like doing 30-minute studies, doing 1 hour studies, doing 5 hour studies. The thing is, you learn very different things from them. If you were to do have a character and you were to do a 30-minute study, you would learn so much, but you will learn different things than you would learn from a 10-hour study. You would learn more about gesture and all of that than you would about a 10-hour study. Well, a 10-hour study, you might not even learn gesture because you might get too focused on details right away. But on the short study, you don't have time for anything else. You only have time for the gesture, so you would just naturally learn more about that. Do you have any plans for making a tutorial series that covers making a CG creature from the concepting stage to all the way to compositing? I don't have any plans on it right now, but I would love to do that though. It's kind of like, it's on my wish list. It's just hard, to find the time for all the things I want to do. But I'm working on a course that's soon. I'm going to start recording it soon, which is really fun. It's going to be how to make a really nice character using Substance Painter, how to texture it from scratch. Really talking about like production workflows and such. So yeah, we can do like some last questions now, and then we can finish this off. So find your best questions. Curious questions, are still open for internships? I don't understand that questions. We never really had interns. So do you have any creature skin texture courses available? Oh yes, we do. That's the course I literally just had open right here. This is a fantastic one. Let me just post this here, and then I'll post a link to it here. So here you can check out this one here. This is a really good course. We don't have a whole lot right now. I would love to get more into texturing. Every time I have an idea for a course, Morten is like, yeah, but how about when you're doing texturing? And I'm like, oh yeah, texturing. It's one of those, I kind of forgot that I was also a texture artist. I kept just thinking that I was a sculptor, but I spent half my career as a pure texture artist. So I need to do more of that. We have one texturing course actually, which I did make. Hand painting, Substance Painter. We might find it here. It's more about like color theory and how to make something that how to hand paint something. This is a really fun one. Here we use some pretty interesting techniques for how to build this, how to hand paint textures like this, like how to hand paint this from scratch. It's really beneficial to be able to learn how to hand paint. Like this is where we didn't use any photo projection at all for this. This is all just like hand painted. Oh, we actually have a product I want to show you guys, which is really cool. This is something a lot of people don't know exists. We have the eye kit. This is a fantastic kit. It's basically like plug and play, how to make realistic eyes. Just drag and drop them in, and we have like the 6 eyes here, and they also work in marmoset as well, and they look basically photoreal out of the box. I think legit this is like one of the highest quality eyes available, commercially available. At least I haven't seen anything higher than this. I think this is better than what we had in VFX as well. At least I couldn't remember seeing anything more high quality than this in VFX. So I hope you guys enjoy that as well. Of course, 50% off now as well. Is it ethical to use kit bashing for 3D concepting than replicating in Maya? I mean, if you're concepting, like, you know, there are no rules for that. Use whatever resources you have available. There's no reason whatsoever for you to make something from scratch. Like Andrew, who was just in the chat before, I'm not sure if he's still here. He has some really good kit bash kits as well, which, you know, is used for concepting for hard surface. There's just no reason at all to do anything from scratch if you are a concept artist. If you're learning, a bit of a different story. But if you are particularly if you are doing concept, then it's all about the idea. It's not about clean topology or anything like that. If you're a concept artist, it's about the final concept. You know, do whatever it takes to get there. How many focused hours should I spend a day to learn 3D Maya? Yeah, it's a good question. Depends how many hours you have available. I mean, you know, ideally something like a whole working day, like 8 hours is fantastic if you have that. But spend as much as you can, but try to be smart about it as well. It's not just about the hours, it's about consistency as well. It's much better to spend like a few hours a day on it consistently than trying to like cram it all into like one day at the end. Can you recommend any courses about creating natural environments for games? Yes, indeed we can. We have some on our page here, made by the fantastic Emil. Let's see here where we have it. Yeah, we have a lot of courses here. You can go to this page here. You can sort by newest products. So you can go here. We also we have a few environmental courses, but we also have Fast Track. They released a really cool course. This is fantastic. So this is made by Emil Sligers, and he has a lot of really cool courses here, like this one. Just, you know, building this entire thing from scratch. This is an Unreal Engine 5, I believe. So this is pretty sick stuff, covering all the stuff start to finish. Right, let's do one more question, and then I'll be off. Then maybe I'll have time to watch the latest Wheel of Time episode. Yeah, so I'm just sculpting now until we find a really good like last question. Just trying out a few of these crazy clay brushes, seeing if there's something interesting here. What is something you're excited to bring to FlippedNormals 2022? There's one product which I'm really excited about. That is the FlippedNormals face kit. This is a really cool one. It's is what I used for. Let's see if I still have this guy for this one here. It's a set of alphas that's just fantastic. I might be able to show you guys something. Just have to change the interface a little, if I can. And then let's see if we have this. Just trying to find the alphas now. So I'm really excited about this kit. This is gonna be a really cool one. Okay, so here we have some alphas which I'm loading in now. I just have to adjust the mid value. Let's see if you can actually use this on this guy here, on the back of his head. Yeah, this will work, I think. I just have to use the standard brush for this, and then use one of these. So this is like, you know, first time anyone's actually seeing this. So I guess let's do it on this guy here. He's a higher poly count here. So the idea is to just make really, really, really high quality alphas like this. The skin kit is fantastic, but it's made for general skin. You know, it has reptile skin, it has all sorts of stuff. But this is made specifically for human skin. Like this is extracted from a person, from different areas. So we have a bunch of different ones here. And I just picked the same one twice. So you can see we have the really, really high quality alphas with really nice pores. I'm not sure how much you can actually see off from the stream quality here. But yeah, just very, very, very high quality. So I'm super excited about this one. So I'm working on this guy here to showcase it. Just because it's so fast to get in here and just like to add some kind of skin alphas. So yeah, very excited about this one here. Might continue this guy. I kind of like him. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, guys. I had a really good time here now, and yeah, this is the last reminder here. We have the today is actually Black Friday. It's not just a Black Friday sale; it's actually the Friday. So we have tons of products now. Most products on the shop are 30% off. All are FlippedNormals exclusives. If you go to FlippedNormals.com and then you go to FN exclusives here, you can find all of our own exclusives, which is what we've been mostly working on. And we have a bunch of amazing stuff from our creators as well. Like, this is a cool one. Let me just show you this before we leave. This is Builder 4 came out, which is such a cool product, where you can just make all sorts of crazy characters right away. But I digress. I was going like, you hang up first. No, you hang up first. But yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, guys. And we'll probably do some more streams as well in maybe like next week. So see you guys.